Hey, it's Richard. I thought feeling tired was just aging until I learned what was really going on. Today, I'll share the simple change that brought my energy back after 60.
Well, now, friend, let me tell you something I've been chewing on lately. You ever notice how once you hit a certain age, let's say 70, give or take, the world suddenly treats you like a fragile antique? Doctors, neighbors, even your own kids start looking at you like you're made of glass. Every cough is a crisis, every ache is an emergency, and every trip to the doctor ends with a new test, a new scan, or a new pill. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for modern medicine. I wouldn't be here without it. But sometimes I think the medical machine gets a little carried away. It's like they forget that aging is natural, not a disease. And the truth is, some of these so-called routine checkups they push on us after 70, they can do more harm than good. I know, you're thinking, Richard, you're just being stubborn again. Gladys says the same thing every time I refuse to sign up for another round of poking and prodding. But hear me out. I've seen it with my own eyes, in my friends, my neighbors, even in myself. And I've got stories. Ooh, do I have stories. Take Rose, for example. Sweet woman, retired piano teacher. Always had a smile, always smelled faintly of lavender, and always had a tin of butter cookies on her counter. She'd never broken a bone in her life, walked every day, ate her sardines like clockwork. Then one day, her doctor says, "Rose, let's do a bone density scan, just to be safe." Now, a bone density scan sounds harmless enough. Quick zap, no needles, no pain. But the results came back with this word, osteopenia. Doesn't that sound terrifying, like a villain from a Marvel movie? Beware, osteopenia is coming for your skeleton. Rose was scared half to death. Next thing you know, she's on medication. Bisphosphonates, they call them. Fancy name, nasty side effects. Within 3 months, Rose had jaw pain so bad she couldn't play piano. Imagine that. Medicine meant to protect her bones nearly stole her music. We got her off the pills, onto vitamin D, leafy greens, and a little resistance band workout. A year later, she was back at the piano, stronger than ever. Played a recital at the senior center, and I swear, even Walter, who never claps for anything, stood up and cheered. Sometimes the scan does more harm than the so-called disease. And then there's George, retired engineer, sharp as a tack. Built half the bridges in this county, or so he claims. But he started misplacing his keys. Who hasn't? I once found mine in the freezer next to the frozen peas. His doctor sends him for a brain MRI. Shows some white spots. George panics, thinks it's dementia. Stops driving, stops going to church, stops playing dominoes with Mahmoud on Thursdays. The man practically retired from life. But here's the truth. Those white spots? Totally normal. Age-related changes, like wrinkles on the inside. The MRI scared him more than his memory ever did. We got him back on track with sleep, hydration, and brain games. Within 3 months, he was sharper than me on trivia night. And that's saying something, because I once beat Gladys on a question about Frank Sinatra. She still hasn't forgiven me. Now, let me pause here and ask you, have you ever had a test that scared you more than it helped you? Drop it in the comments, because I promise you, you're not alone.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Richard, aren't you being a little dramatic? Surely these tests save lives. And you're right, sometimes they do. But here's the thing. After 70, the math changes. The risks of the tests themselves start to outweigh the benefits. It's like crossing a rickety old bridge. You might make it across, but you might also fall through the cracks. Let me tell you about a conversation I had with Walter down at the Lions Club. Walter's the kind of guy who reads every pamphlet in the doctor's office. He came in waving one around saying, "Richard, it says right here that a stress test could save my life." I said, "Walter, You've been walking to the diner every morning for 30 years without chest pain. If your heart was going to give out, it would have done it halfway through a plate of biscuits and gravy. We laughed, but then I told him about Raymond's ordeal with the stent. Walter's eyes got wide. You mean they put that thing in him for nothing? He asked. For less than nothing, I said. They put it in him for dehydration, and last I checked, water's still free. That's the problem, friend. These tests can turn a little fatigue into a full-blown medical adventure. And not the fun kind, like Mahmoud's stories about backpacking through Spain in his 20s. No, I'm talking about the kind of adventure where you end up in a hospital gown, eating Jell-O, and wondering how you got there. Speaking of Mahmoud, he's got a saying I love: don't borrow trouble. He says it every time Gladys starts worrying about something that hasn't happened yet. And that's exactly what some of these tests do. They make us borrow trouble. They show us shadows and call them monsters. Take George's MRI. Perfect example. That man was convinced he had dementia because of a few white spots on a scan. He gave up half his life before we even had a chance to prove him wrong. And you know what brought him back? Not another test, not another pill, just good old-fashioned living. Sleep, water, brain games, and a little reassurance. Sometimes the cure isn't in a machine. It's in reminding ourselves that aging is normal. Now let me ask you something, friend. Have you ever had a doctor tell you something that scared you so badly you couldn't sleep at night, and then later you found out it wasn't nearly as bad as it sounded? If you have, I want you to share it in the comments, because I guarantee you someone else out there needs to hear they're not alone. And then there's Dana. Oh, Dana. If you've never had one of her cinnamon rolls, you haven't lived. She and her daughter ran that little bakery on Main Street, the one with the blue awning. No symptoms, no family history, nothing. But her young doctor insisted on a colonoscopy. She agreed. They found a tiny polyp, removed it, and that night, bam, bowel perforation. 9 days in the hospital. Lost weight, lost energy, lost her spark. When she came back to the bakery, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Richard, I'd rather risk a polyp than go through that again." And I couldn't argue with her. Because here's the truth. The U.S. Preventative Services Task Force says most folks can stop routine colonoscopies at 75. But you won't see that on a billboard. You won't hear it in the waiting room. You gotta dig for it, or have a neighbor like me who won't shut up about it. And then, of course, there's Marcus. 80 years old, still teaching martial arts to the younger seniors. Moves like a cat, reflexes like a fox. Goes in for one of those fancy executive checkups. Full body CT scan. Finds a tiny nodule. Panic ensues. More scans, a biopsy, collapsed lung, 2 months in recovery. And the nodule? Harmless. I told him, "Marcus, you were healthier teaching karate than lying in that hospital bed." He laughed, but you could see the regret. These scans can cause more cancer than they prevent. That's not me talking. That's the science. And yet they're marketed like some kind of golden ticket to immortality. So what do we do, friend? Do we swear off doctors altogether? Of course not. But we do need to ask better questions. Like, what happens next if this test finds something? If the answer sounds like a rabbit hole of panic and procedures, maybe it's time to pause. Because prevention isn't about chasing every shadow. It's about living well. Move your body, eat your greens, sleep like a baby, and laugh often. That's the real medicine. And let me tell you, laughter is underrated. Just last week, Gladys tripped over her own shoelaces at bingo night and landed in Walter's lap. The whole room erupted. She was fine, thank goodness, but I swear that laughter did more for our blood pressure than any pill. So here's my challenge to you. Before you sign up for the next test, ask yourself if it's going to give you peace of mind or steal it. Because at our age, peace of mind is worth more than gold.
You know, the funny thing about all this is how quickly a routine checkup can snowball. One minute you're sitting in the waiting room flipping through a 3-year-old magazine about gardening, and the next you're being scheduled for a test you didn't even know existed. And once you're on that conveyor belt, it's hard to get off. I remember sitting with Gladys at the diner one morning. She was stirring her coffee like it had personally offended her. I asked what was wrong, and she said, "Richard, they want me to do another mammogram. I'm 75. I've had clean ones for years. Do I really need this?" I told her, "Gladys, I'm not your doctor, but I am your friend. And as your friend, I say you've got to ask them what they're looking for and what happens if they find it." She sighed and said, "They never explain it that way." And that's the problem. Doctors are trained to find things. That's their job. But sometimes finding things isn't the same as helping. Sometimes it just means more worry, more procedures, more side effects. And at our age, worry is the last thing we need. We've got grandkids to spoil, gardens to tend, and bingo nights to win. Speaking of bingo, Walter still insists on using those lucky red chips of his. He swears they bring him good fortune. I told him, "Walter, if those chips were really lucky, you wouldn't have had 3 colonoscopies in the last decade." He laughed, but then he admitted he never questioned it. "The doctor said it was routine," he shrugged. And that's how it happens. Routine becomes ritual, and ritual becomes risk. Now, I'm not saying we should ignore our health, far from it. But there's a difference between being proactive and being paranoid. Proactive is eating your vegetables, taking a walk, getting good sleep. Paranoid is signing up for every scan and scope just because someone in a white coat says so. Let me tell you about a study I read. Yes, I still read studies even in retirement. Old habits die hard. This one looked at seniors over 70 who had regular full-body scans. Do you know what they found? More cancers caused by the radiation from the scans than cancers prevented by catching something early. Imagine that. The very thing meant to save you ends up hurting you. It's like trying to put out a candle with a fire hose. You cause more damage than the flame ever would have. Marcus learned that the hard way with his collapsed lung. He told me later, "Richard, I wish I just skipped the whole thing." And I told him, "Marcus, hindsight's 20/20. The best we can do now is tell our stories so others don't make the same mistake." And that's why I'm telling you all this, friend, because maybe you're sitting there wondering if you should go through with that test your doctor just ordered. Maybe you're scared to say no. Maybe you don't want to seem difficult. But let me tell you something. It's your body, your life, your choice. Doctors are advisors, not dictators. You have every right to ask questions, to weigh the risks, to say, "Not today." Now, let me ask you, have you ever felt pressured into a test or procedure you weren't sure about? Did you go through with it? How did it turn out? Share it in the comments, because your story might be the one that gives someone else the courage to speak up. And speaking of courage, Mahmoud told me a story the other day that stuck with me. Back in his 20s, he was traveling through Spain. He got lost in a little village where no one spoke his language. Instead of panicking, he sat down in the town square, pulled out his guitar, and started playing. Within minutes, people gathered around, smiling, clapping, offering him food. He said, "Richard, sometimes the best way to face the unknown is to stop fighting it and just live." That's what I think about when I hear folks rushing into tests out of fear. Fear makes us do strange things. But life isn't meant to be lived in fear. It's meant to be lived in moments, like Mahmoud's guitar in that Spanish square, or Rose's piano recital, or Dana's cinnamon rolls fresh out of the oven. So here's my advice, neighbor to neighbor. Don't let fear drive your health decisions. Let wisdom, balance, and joy drive them. Because at the end of the day, the goal isn't just to live longer, it's to live better.
You know, the older I get, the more I realize that health isn't just about what the doctor says. It's about how you live your days. I've seen folks who never missed a checkup, who had every test under the sun, and still spent their golden years anxious and frail. And I've seen others who skipped half the tests, but filled their lives with laughter, good food, and long walks, and they seemed to glow with health. Gladys likes to tease me about being anti-doctor. I tell her, no, Gladys, I'm not anti-doctor. I'm pro-Richard. And really, that's what it comes down to. We've got to be pro ourselves. Because at this stage of life, nobody knows our bodies better than we do. I'll give you an example. Last month, Walter came to me all worked up. His doctor wanted him to do another round of blood work, a stress test, and a scan just to be safe. Walter said, Richard, I feel fine. I walk every morning. I mow my own lawn. I even danced at my granddaughter's wedding. Why do I need all this? I said, Walter, if you feel fine, maybe you are fine. Don't let them convince you you're broken just because you're older. He thought about that for a while, then said, you know, Richard, I think you're right. I'm going to ask him what he expects to find and what happens if he does. And that's the key, friend. Ask the questions. Don't just nod and sign the forms. Mahmoud told me once, in my culture, we say the wise man asks twice before he agrees once. That stuck with me. Because too often we agree once without asking at all. And then we end up like Marcus, lying in a hospital bed because of a test that never should have been done. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm preaching. Lord knows I've made my share of mistakes. I once agreed to a scan just because the doctor said it's routine. Next thing I knew, I was lying in a machine that sounded like a jackhammer, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. The results? Nothing important. But the bill? Let's just say I could have taken Gladys on a cruise with that money. As always, I'm not giving medical advice. Always check with your doctor before starting a new exercise routine. And speaking of cruises, did I ever tell you about the time Walter and I went on that senior cruise to Alaska? They had a wellness seminar on board, and wouldn't you know it, half the seminar was about all the tests we needed. I leaned over to Walter and said, if they tested us for everything they just listed, we'd never leave the ship. He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his soup. That's the thing, friend. There's always someone ready to sell you another test, another pill, another procedure. But what they can't sell you is peace of mind. That you've got to claim for yourself. So here's what I want you to remember. Aging is not a disease. Wrinkles, gray hair, slower steps, those are badges of honor. They mean you've lived, you've loved, you've made it this far. Don't let anyone turn your life into a checklist of tests. Instead, focus on the things that really matter. Eat food that nourishes you. Move your body in ways that bring you joy. Sleep deeply. Laugh often. Hug your grandkids. Tell your stories. That's the kind of medicine no machine can give you. And let me ask you, neighbor, what's the one thing you do that makes you feel truly alive? Is it gardening? Dancing? Playing cards with friends? Share it in the comments. Because I want to know. And I'll bet someone else out there needs your reminder that life is about living, not just testing. So, here we are at the end of this long chat. 5 tests that sound helpful but can actually hurt. 5 stories of friends who learned the hard way. And one simple truth. Sometimes less is more. If you've ever felt pressured, if you've ever regretted a test, if you've ever wondered whether you're being over-tested, you're not alone. We're all in this together, and together we can choose wisely. So do me a favor, friend. Hit that like button if this resonated with you. Subscribe if you want more neighborly chats like this. And most importantly, share your story in the comments. Because your voice matters.
That was all for today. Stay curious, stay moving, and stay young at heart. See you next time.